Hello, and welcome back to Wired for Change, where we talk about the technologies, people, and ideas reshaping our world. I'm your host, Amy Yee. Policing is a profession that sits at the intersection of public trust, leadership, and responsibility, often in situations that most of us only see from the outside. But behind the uniforms and the headlines, people are working within complex systems, navigating difficult moments, and making decisions in real time. My guest today is Kelly Bradshaw, whose work with the RCMP has included service within specialized operational teams managing high-pressure public order environments, as well as experiences doing peacekeeping with the UN. Kelly's got an incredible amount of experience to bring with us today. Today's conversation is going to be about the human side within this work. We're going to talk about the leadership lessons, the realities of operating in such high-pressure environments, as well as looking at what it takes to sit within a role that has so much responsibility and scrutiny attached with it as well. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Amy. And I have to say, I'm flattered to be here and grateful as well. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm really excited about our conversation today. I think, Kelly, I'd love to start with what drew you to the RCMP in the first place. Tell us a little bit about your background and history and how you got to the RCMP.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. So, geez, you're bringing me back many years ago. So, I grew up in New Brunswick in a small town called Oromocto near CFB Gagetown. And I was going to UNB in Fredericton. And at the time, I was finishing my sports science degree. So it's called kinesiology nowadays. I was finishing that degree, and I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't really want to keep going, like staying in school. I wanted to get out into the workforce. And a good friend of mine who grew up in that small town with me, she had joined the RCMP, and she came home before her first deployment. And she just looked me square in the eye and says, "You have to join the RCMP. It'd be perfect for you." And I think the reason why she thought it would be perfect for me is because she explained to me that, it's really challenging. It's teamwork. You can have an impact. You can make a difference. Um, I was just really amazed. I thought it was really brave of her to do that. And I thought, well, if she can do it, I can do it. And so I thought, I'm going to join. I'm going to try it. And hey, if it doesn't work out, I'll just like go back to school and continue on with my career and maybe become an occupational therapist or physiotherapist. I wasn't sure, but I thought I'll give it a go and I'll give it 100%. And I went to training in 1995 in Regina, Saskatchewan, where all the Mounties go to be trained. And I never looked back. Like, I loved it. I have to say, I was disappointed at first because in training, they ask you, hey, like, what are your top 3 choices? Where would you like to live?
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, being the good maritime girl that I am, I said I'd like to go to New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, or Newfoundland. And then I got my posting to Vancouver Island, British Columbia.
As far away as you could get.
I looked at the map and I was like, oh my goodness, I was very sad. I was going to miss my family and my friends back home. But once I got to Vancouver Island, I mean, what a great posting. It was beautiful. I went to a small town called Souk
Mm-hmm.
on Vancouver Island, and I never looked back. I loved it.
Amazing.
hmm
And what did your family think of your decision?
Well, I think they were proud of me.
Yeah.
I think, a little concerned, especially when I was moving on the other side of the country I think I had just turned 22 years old. And,
Mhm.
growing up in New Brunswick in a small town, I kind of lived a sheltered life and it was a nice childhood. And I don't think I was ready for everything I was going to be exposed to. But I think one thing about me is I can adapt and overcome.
Mhm.
hmm
Wow, I love that story. It's amazing, like, what one person can do in your life to completely change things.
hmm And I have to say too, like the RCMP were very visible in my hometown growing up. And,
Mhm.
I knew a few of those folks as well. And they were, they encouraged me, very supportive. I just felt, yeah, really supported.
Amazing.
hmm
That's wonderful. And so once you started that work, what were some of the things that maybe surprised you about it that you didn't know going in?
Yeah. So I think probably, you know, it's the amount of responsibility that comes with being a police officer. I mean, I think I knew that, but when you think about, the authority that you have, uh, the responsibility to do the right thing, um, and, to be kind to people. Like, this is a tough job. You kind of see people on their worst day. And I think for me, I was surprised as well that I worked alone a lot. I mean, I was on patrol by myself. It wasn't like two in a car or, and sometimes I'd be over an hour away from any backup and that sort of thing. So I found right away, I learned I had to, um, I think my best, um, what I say, weapon would be my ability to communicate with people, and I think when you're on your own and you have things that you have to deal with, that you're faced with, I think the best thing that you can do is it's how you communicate with people. It's how you approach the situation. It's how you de-escalate things. And it's treating people with respect to get respect.
Wow. Do you
Yeah.
have an early, experience story that illustrates that?
Well, I mean, I have so many stories that I could share. Some more intense than others. But I do have kind of a funny story I could share.
Yeah,
I remember the first car I pulled over for speeding.
yeah.
I was so nervous. And I'm sure it showed, but I remember walking up to the car and I was, doing everything I'd learned in training and asked for the individual's driver's license and registration. And he turned and he looked at me and he was a man probably in mid 40s. And he looked at me, he said, "Are they hiring summer students from high school now?" And I was thinking, that's not a good way to get out of a ticket. But
Honestly, did you say
no,
that?
but I did give him a warning, but I just remember being so deflated.
People do judge on how you look, and
Yes,
sometimes they say it, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
So was that something that, you were just prepared for all the time, after that? Just prepared that people might underestimate you
Yes.
or yeah.
Yeah. I have another kind of funny
Yeah.
story about being underestimated. Um, and I'm kind of jumping forward many years, but when I was deployed to Mali in West Africa, in 2019, I led the first police contingent from Canada over to Mali to the mission for the United Nations. And I remember showing up a day late. It was just the way that our flights were arranged. We showed up to the initial training portion a day late at the mission, and so already I was a little bit behind the eight ball with everybody else because they'd been there for a day and already everyone had become acquainted from all the different nations. And I just remember walking in the room and as usual, I'm 5'4", blonde ponytail, walking in, and I just could feel eyes on me, and I could just kind of feel this feeling of, "Oh, she's the leadership from Canada." And then, as we settled into the training for a few days, I got to know people, and then we went out to the range and we started shooting, and I can shoot. And then we went to the driving, area to do different maneuvers and I could drive.
Nice.
And probably, I think a lot of the men that were maybe kind of doubting me or, underestimated me, I noticed right away. I was like, I had gained their respect by just my abilities.
Wow, that's awesome, good for you.
Yeah. It's always fun to do that,
Yeah, for sure.
especially at the firearms range.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I wish I could say that I have something to compare with that, but I guess the closest for me would be I used to play a lot of pool.
Mhm. Yeah. So you know what it's
And,
like.
yeah, I used to shark people. With that very different situation. Did you have to you wouldn't have always had the opportunity to shoot or demonstrate, like, your abilities that way in situations where you had to establish credibility quickly. What other ways did you have to use, like, to establish that credibility in these kinds of situations?
Yeah, so I think it's, showing people that I have the ability to walk into a situation, whether it's a domestic dispute or, could be an argument between neighbors and really, get in there and diffuse the situation and, have separate the people that are having the problems and listening and, trying to seeking to understand and then trying to come up with a proper resolution that everyone can live with.
Mhm.
um, so I think it's, the approach to problem solving is super important and how you treat people. Um, and then, policing, whether we like it or not, at times it does get physical. And you know, yeah, you have to jump in there and you know, do what you have to do to make an arrest if someone's resisting, and that sort of thing. And obviously, there's an escalation that you follow in terms of using force, and you don't use any more force than is necessary. And obviously, with someone with my stature, I don't, I have to understand what my abilities are and my capabilities are. And so often I didn't get into many physical altercations, but when I did, I held my own.
Good for you.
Hmm.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Are there any misconceptions that you've run into about what policing work is like that the public might have?
Well, I think for me, what I used to feel like, if I'd walk into a coffee shop, and thank you for the coffee, by the way,
You're very
it's
welcome.
delicious. If I'd walk into a coffee shop in uniform or just, stop into, I don't know, the dry cleaners if I had to drop something off while I was working in a small town, I often felt like people kind of judged me by my uniform. Because you're working in a position of authority, you're working for the government. You don't know what some people's interaction with police have been in the past. So I always felt like I had to kind of overcome that stigma, like, because I always just felt like I'm Kelly, I'm me.
Right.
Like, I want to help people.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not here on a power trip. I
Yeah.
just want to make the town or our world a better place.
Right.
So I felt like sometimes the uniform changed how people would view me. But often I think you can kind of get beyond that if they give you the time to get like for you to get to know them and then to get to know you.
You have such a great kind of aura as well, Kelly. I'm sure that must have helped,
It did.
also.
It did, and it helped me a lot with, I really connected with youth,
Mhm.
in the communities where I worked, and, there's a lot going on with some kids these days, like, in terms of, again, I grew up in a very, loving home
Yeah.
and, stable community, stable home. But I found, I was surprised with some kids that were, bouncing around from foster homes or living on the streets or being sexually exploited, being abused. Like, I think for me, I just really wanted to help people who are more vulnerable in terms of their ability to make the right connections in the community to get support and to get help. Again, there's a barrier sometimes when they see you as a police officer, they don't trust you right away, but if you can build that trust, it goes such a long way.
Mhm.
And even I think what surprised me too when I first started working on Vancouver Island is just going into some homes where, I was young, I was 22 years old, going into homes where there was, there were women younger than me who had, two children
Mhm.
and were struggling. And, you know, really needed the community support, but often it was, for whatever reason, the police were being called to their homes and whether it's domestics or there was drugs, that sort of thing. And so I found like I just really was able to connect with women and youth
Mhm.
to really try to help get them the supports they needed.
Wow. And how do you, like, sleep at night when you're doing this kind of work, when you're feeling so connected and you're seeing people who are in very difficult, situations? Um, it must be hard, I guess, to sort of go home at the end of the day and just kind of relax sometimes.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But I think as a coping mechanism,
Mhm.
and I think I speak for a lot of police officers and probably healthcare workers as well, is you got to like compartmentalize a lot
Yeah.
of things,
Yeah.
and it's a survival technique because if you worry about everyone all the time, and I mean, I think it would just make you go a little crazy. So I think, um, you know, try to do what you can, know that you've done your job and that you're, if you've set them up for further support and further help, um, your job is done. But I like to stay connected to people. I always loved when if I ever had a free, few minutes on a Sunday night and I would go meet someone for a coffee or have tea in Bannock on the reserve that was nearby with some ladies that I knew there. Um, but yeah, just trying to stay connected to people and check in on them as much as you can.
Mhm.
But it is hard. I mean, we see a lot. We have to deal with a
Yeah.
lot of really horrible things. I also think, I mean, I have two boys. They're now 17 and 19. But while I was doing like general duty kind of frontline patrol, I was in my 20s. I didn't have children. I think now that I'm a mother and I have children, I think some things would have affected me even more, especially things with children and
Yeah.
families. But I was able to compartmentalize it because I don't think I could totally fully relate yet.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. That's a really great insight to
Hmm.
share, and that resonates, with me. I've done, some work in the community as well, and things hit like differently
Hmm.
after I became a mother
Hmm.
as well. So,
Yeah. I mean, I think you always connect on a human level no matter what, but there's something about when you become a parent or a mother,
mhm.
um, yeah, like I can cry right now just
I know, me too. Sorry, like a moment. Which is a great, segue into the idea of resilience. You and I have talked about resilience in the past. We were on a panel together
Yes.
in the fall of last year about resilience. Is there anything that you can tell me about, you know, how you realize that your profession required a lot of resilience and how you built that resilience?
Yeah, so I think, we continuously learn throughout our lives, and I think we continuously grow in terms of our maybe maturity is not the right word, but just maybe it's about resilience. But when I think about when I first joined the RCMP, I remember, I worked mainly with men
Mhm.
and I wanted to fit in, and that's super important.
Yeah.
Um, and I found often I would hear from some of the men that I worked with that I was too nice to people
Mhm.
or that I was taking too much time, maybe, doing those extra things. And I just, at first, it kind of hurt me. But then I thought about it and I thought, okay, I'm going to listen to what they're saying. And then I also noticed, there was a few things that I went to, like different calls and different things I dealt with where I was affected and emotionally. And I learned quite quickly that you can't, you shouldn't show your emotions, at least back then. Um, And so I really at the beginning, I noticed myself changing. I was more like one of the guys. I was a little more abrupt, a little more like I wouldn't let myself feel like I normally did. I often wouldn't I would almost try to make myself feel smaller in terms of when I'd show up at work, no makeup, just very plain, right? I didn't want to stand out.
Yeah.
And then maybe about a year in, it was kind of like driving me crazy inside. Like I had like an itch to just like, I wanted to be myself.
Yeah.
And so I think slowly I returned to who I am. And I think it's super important as police officers that you show up to work as your authentic self. Because I think that's what makes policing so interesting is that, if we're all the same and we're all like robots and we all act the same and we're I don't know, just kind of methodical and don't have that connection or if you can't express yourself the way that like how you are, I think that's really limiting and I think it's not doing the profession any like respect. I think it's really important that everyone should be able to show up and be themselves at work. Obviously, there's laws and policies and all that. I'm
Sure.
not talking about like, cutting corners there. I'm just saying you should be able to show up and be yourself and be accepted and feel like you fit in and not have to change to fit in.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. I think that probably applies to a lot of professions,
Mhm.
as well. But particularly here, it must be difficult when there's so much pressure to kind of, especially if you're the only woman
Mhm.
on a team, for instance. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I found myself being, you know, the only woman around tables often, whether it was with like public order activities, so crowd control, or when I get into technical investigations here in Ottawa with like covert electronic surveillance and wiretaps. Often I was the only woman around that kind of more technical table.
Mhm.
Um, and then, I found it again when um, near the end of my career, while I deployed with the UN, obviously the UN wants more women in leadership positions. So I was able to fulfill that role for them. But there wasn't very many women in that mission, which was the largest mission on the planet, that were women in leadership roles. There just weren't those You just didn't see it. And then again, when I finished my career with the RCMP in financial crime and cybercrime, leading that for federal policing criminal operations, again, I mean, I think there was starting to become more women involved in those areas, but definitely not in the leadership area. So, um, but I'm really encouraged by what I'm seeing now. I'm seeing more and more women
Mhm.
in those kind of more male focused roles or traditional male focused roles. Um, so it's happening slowly, but I do think that you need to see women to make it really meaningful. It's at all levels, right? Not just the bottom, not just the top. It has to be throughout.
Okay.
Hmm.
I'm gonna come back to that point in terms of why you feel that's important.
Hmm.
But first, I want to help people understand a little bit more about what these situations are like, so that they can understand, some of the pressures there, in addition to being a woman and a leader in those roles. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about, what it's like to work in a public order kind of situation. Like, tell us about that for people who aren't even familiar with that beyond maybe seeing a few things on TV.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I often wonder, like, how did I didn't really have a plan when I joined the RCMP in terms of what I wanted to do. I just, doors open and you either walk in them or you don't. But
Okay.
I walked in some doors that really opened up for me. And I became involved with the public order team on Vancouver Island. I think it was around 1998 or 1999. And what was happening is at the time, the troop, they call it, so it's a large troop. It's a group of about 80 or 90 people, right, that
Well,
form this large public order troop. So sticks, shields, helmets. We had dogs that were trained with us as well for aggression. Uh, but at the time, Vancouver Island had, I think, about 3 or 4 migrant ships that showed up on their shores, and there was just boatloads of people that the police needed to kind of bring to a place, a secure facility to understand who these people were, who the organized crime group on the boat was that brought them there.
wow.
So there was a lot of different things happening, and what they found was there was a lot of women and children on this boat,
Hmm.
and so the public order team, which was mostly men, were looking for women police officers to help at this. They called it a detention facility, a temporary detention facility that was set up at CFB Esquimalt. And so I put up my hand and I said, sure, I'll help you. I'll help you out. And so I went there and I rolled up my sleeves and worked really hard. I mean, it wasn't pretty. It was, I was in a full suit. There was I had to be in a shower room. There I mean, getting into details, but like, people who've been on a boat for months on end
Mhm.
underneath, there's lice, they're not clean. And so I helped the women and children get cleaned.
Okay.
And then every day they would see me because I would show up and we would interact. And yeah, I was there all summer, like while this got sorted out. And of course, the guys on the team saw that I was a good worker and they said, "Why don't you join the team permanently?"
Mhm.
And then there was a follow-on things happening like there always is. So besides dealing with this temporary detention facility, we had protests happening like outside the Parliament building in Victoria or up on logging roads um, more in the interior of the island. And so we were deployed to different things. So I received the training, I worked really hard, and I became a member of the team.
Wow.
And so, at the time I was a constable and kind of just taking it all in and, some of the training too, like we had to wear gas masks and we would get gassed and, to make sure that we knew how to react and knew how to just work
Wow.
in that environment. But at the same time, I was a bit of an overachiever at the time. And again, I didn't have children at that time. I was going back to school. I was doing my master's in conflict analysis and management at Royal Roads University. And I was, so at the whole time that I'm dealing with all of this from a public order point of view, I'm learning about conflict analysis and management. And I'm thinking, it's not that we're doing anything wrong,
Yeah.
but I think we can do things better.
Okay.
And so I was thinking about how when a public order team shows up, it's very intimidating. And, it really should be the last resort because it kind of means things are out of control and we need to restore order, right?
Okay.
But I think was really encouraging over the years, and I think, I would hope I was part of it, is I saw how we evolved public order, um, in terms of, like, the de-escalation pieces, the gradual approach, not showing up as 86 people ready for the fight. It's like,
Right.
let's show up a few people in maybe softer uniforms that aren't fully geared
Right.
to have conversations. Let's, like, try to figure this out. Let's try to de-escalate as much as we can before we have to bring in the full team, and it's a full-on, situation
Nice.
that requires all of the training that we have for public order. And I've been to a major protest situation that was in 2001, the Summit of Americas, the British Columbia team. I was with them. We traveled to Quebec City, and it was when they were holding the Summit of Americas event. And they had put up a large fence around Quebec City, which people were not happy with
Okay.
from I guess from a charter of rights and freedoms. People wanted to be seen and heard, which is their right.
Hmm.
Um, but there was also folks there that wanted a good fight with the police, I think, too, and
Hmm.
to disrupt things. And so that was the first time that I really felt like, wow, my training that I've had has really prepared me for this. And this is the real deal. We walked in to a situation where gas had already been dispersed. It was foggy. You couldn't really see. You didn't know what you were going into. The fence had been breached, and there was a full on situation. And
Wow.
that the team that I was with from British Columbia, we were there for it was 18 hours we worked that day, and we were in gas masks most of the time.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was pretty, you know, it's a situation you don't want to see in Canada for
Yeah.
sure. But I really felt as well that from a training perspective, it's like, wow, we knew what we were doing and we did it well.
Wow. That kind of situation must really kind of, bond you with other people on your team as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What can you tell me a little bit about kind of the team culture?
Yeah, like I think what I learned the most about being part of the public order teams and everything I think experience is so valuable. So you can have all the, have read all the books, you can have gone to university, but until you do it
Yeah.
and then you learn from it,
Yeah.
like I really feel like everything that I learned through the public order experiences that I had in the RCMP prepared me for taking that first group of police officers in 2019 to Mali. Because when we went over there, I treated it like it was a TAC deployment. And what I mean by that is we went over there, it was the first time. We didn't know where we were going to live. We didn't know how we were going to get around, what vehicles we were going to use. Um, we had to figure things out on the ground. And so I immediately looked at the team of folks that I had at all ranks, and I, assigned logistics, I assigned communications, I assigned people to have responsibility for things that kept us as a cohesive group that was able to function on our own, like on another continent,
And completely just adapt.
and adapt, be creative, but be a true team
Uh-huh.
and really be there for each other.
Wow. What's the most important thing, like, to establish once you get into a situation like that? And you mentioned, needing to assign a lot of
Mhm.
roles, for example. What do you think first when you get into that situation?
I think for me, like, I've never been a big fan of like that command and control, and it's all about like, someone has to give the order and someone has to do it. I've never been a big fan of that on the daily kind of routine work of police work. But I'm telling you, it's so valuable in a public order situation or in a really high intense crisis situation. Someone has to be in charge,
Yeah.
someone is responsible, and they have to be clear of what their expectations are of the team. But it just because you're in charge doesn't mean you have to do everything. It's you have to be really clear in assigning roles and responsibilities, setting your expectations, and meeting with people to make sure that they're meeting those expectations and that you can function as a team. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think like I did learn a lot from that whole structure of a public order team and
Mhm.
how important it was to have all those different roles, to know who the boss was, to know what the commands were and what the mission like what are we doing? Why are we here? What
Mhm.
what are your expectations? I think it's really important.
It sounds very effective.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
just want that clarity, right?
Yeah.
You just need it in when you're making decisions, like in the moment, for
Yeah.
instance, as well.
I think too, something that why I really loved policing, my career in policing,
Mhm.
and why I thrived in most circumstances is because I love a good crisis. Like I come alive when am I allowed to swear when shit is
Yeah.
hitting the fan? That is when I am like firing on all cylinders. That's when I really can zone in and get focused and get it done.
Mhm.
Whereas when I have downtime or when there's less pressure, I'm a bit like I'm a procrastinator. I'm kind of lazy. But if you give me something that's happening in front of me and it like needs you to be like really sharp and dialed in,
Yeah.
I don't know what that says about my personality.
I have a couple of friends like you. Have you always been that way?
I don't know. Like it's funny you asked that because I'm like, who was I before I joined the RCMP? Because I really feel like the RCMP did change me, but maybe it's just that I grew up in the RCMP. That's where I really
Mm.
kind of grew as a person.
Mhm.
I do think I was a different person when I was back home, but I mean, I was a teenager. I was in university. I cared about friends and going to parties and, working on the weekends to have a little bit of money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I don't know. It's weird. Like when you think about kind of
Like,
the,
where did this come from?
yeah, this person.
Really interesting.
Mhm.
And then how did you end up working with the UN on these peacekeeping missions? Was that connected to your RCMP work, or was it
Yeah.
completely different? Okay.
Yeah. So in 2014, I had an opportunity. They were looking for someone to go work at the UN headquarters in New York City. They were looking for someone with experience. So at the time, what was I doing? I was in national security and organized crime, and I was working on like assessments and handling of sensitive information, that sort of thing. They wanted someone to go work with the UN from Canada to work with an Italian colleague on transnational organized crime in West Africa. And so I was able, and of course, again, like I don't want to pull the female card because I don't like that.
Yeah.
But the UN was really adamant. They wanted more women's input especially in a leadership role. So I was picked to go and I was like happy to do it. It was hard for me because I had two young boys at the time. So in 2014, they were probably like 8 and 6
Mhm.
or 8 and 10. And so it was hard to go. But I was back and forth quite a bit and they visited in New York City and they would certainly like that.
Mhm.
They wanted a doorman at our home in Ottawa. I said, I don't think he would be that busy. Anyway.
Back home, where's our doorman? That's funny.
But yeah, so I worked in New York City and I really learned a lot about the UN. I worked in the police division there and the Italian colleague that I worked with was excellent. We did some good work. I traveled. That was the first time that I went to Africa. I traveled to Mali during that time to work with a French colleague who I had been working with remotely. She wanted me to go. We were setting up the first transnational organized crime unit in a UN mission, which was in Mali. And so she just wanted me to go to have kind of a second set of eyes on all of the things that she had set up to make sure she wasn't missing anything or
Mhm.
if I had any input for kind of to enhance it. That was an excellent experience. I really was fascinated with Mali and with Africa and what was going on there. And so I came back to Canada and then, kind of carried on with my career in the RCMP. And then about a couple years later, I went on Canada was hosting a women, I think it was a Francophonie women's leadership course for the UN, and it was in Senegal. And I was asked if I would attend, and so I did, and had a great time. Met so many amazing women from all over, different countries, especially from Africa. And I also met a man there he was like a syndicate leader. He was there to help lead the course. And he was going to be the next police commissioner in Mali at the mission there. And he said, I would love for you to come work with me. And I said, I'll think about it, but I don't want to leave my boys
Right.
like for a year to go to another continent. It was really going to be like, it was just pulling on my heartstrings too much. But I did. I thought about it and was approached again. And I had a conversation with my sons, and we decided that I would do it. And so I went in 2019. And when that police commissioner saw me there, he said, I was so like humbled. He said, I'm not even putting you in the police component. You're going to represent the police component in the strategic planning mission in this mission. He goes, I've been waiting for the right person. And he
Wow.
goes, it's you. And so
Amazing.
I was really like, there was a lot of pressure
Yeah.
to do well. There had never been a uniformed position in that unit, um in that mission. And so myself and a Canadian soldier, a uniformed soldier, were the first ones in that mission or in that unit. And we had an amazing year. And what a group. Like we did some really good work.
What's something that, you're really proud of from that work?
I think what I learned was just like the multilateral approach to things. Like, you know, we were the nucleus of that mission in terms of the planning, the results-based budgeting, everything that went on in that mission went through our office, and just, coordinating movements between military, police, civilians, NGOs, always thinking about security, obviously. I mean, that mission was intense. It was, I went to a funeral for a peacekeeper every week.
Wow.
Um, it was, yeah, it was intense. It was real. And so it was just there was a lot going on, and you're there and there's nothing like you're there to work, and they're long days, and then on top of that, I had I was the boss for the Canadian police officers that were at that mission. And so they were deployed to different regions in Mali, and so I wanted to ensure their safety, to make sure they were supported and had everything they needed. So there was a lot of communication there that I did on, kind of on top of my regular day job. And then there was also, as a leader, I needed to have good relationships with people on the ground in terms of the Canadian military that were there in case we needed to be, for repatriation, if we needed support on the fly, if things went volatile very fast. I, I made great connections with the Canadian embassy there, had a lot of support from the embassy. But, all of those things take time because it's about relationships and it's trust and it's building um, an understanding of that kind of ecosystem that's there, because if you don't understand it and then that shit hits the fan,
Yeah.
you're gonna be in trouble.
Wow. For sure. That's a lot of stakeholders and
Mhm,
people to build relationships with, fairly quickly, I
mhm.
imagine as well. How many were within the Canadian police contingent that were there?
So we had at the time
Mm.
20 people, and we had them. We were deployed within the UN, and then there was a couple that were more on a multilateral agreement with. There was a training school there called École de Maintien de la Paix,
Mhm.
so peacekeeping school.
Mhm.
We had people there, and we also had someone assigned to the EU mission that was there as well.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Wow. Did you ever have any situations where you, like, stepped on anyone's toes by accident, for example?
While I was in Mali, I'm trying to think. I don't think so. I hope not.
Just curious.
um, One thing that I did notice, in that mission that was interesting, so, um, there was only 2 women that had leadership roles within that from the policing side
Mhm.
anyway, from the police component, and that was myself and Suzanne from, she was from Sweden. And it was just interesting the dynamics with some of the men that definitely weren't used to working with women, let alone for women. And they could see that I had a close relationship with the police commissioner. I would attend a lot of meetings with him. I would often
Mhm.
prep him for meetings and provide strategic advice. And so I think they didn't quite know how to deal with me. I think I was always pleasant. I was always, super respectful and kind,
Yeah.
but I think they feared me somewhat. So it was just interesting that dynamic. And I often wouldn't hesitate that if they if somebody wanted, like if the police commissioner wanted something, often I would review it first, and if it wasn't up to standards, I would have no problem saying, you need to redo this.
Neat. What's it like, generally, like, working with other teams from around the world?
It was fascinating.
Yeah.
I think one thing, yeah, like having Canada is such an amazing place to live, first and foremost. And I think we take it for granted. We're not perfect, but um, I think there's a lot of countries that are, have professional police forces. Like if I think about, working, it was really kind of easy to work with Sweden. It was easy to work with the Germans. It was easy to work with the Finns. I know I'm forgetting the Netherlands.
Mhm.
Because often people have degrees, or they have to go through police college to get to where they are to become police officers. um but then there's others where, you know I think because of the situation in their countries, if there's conflict and there's more internal problems,
Yeah.
yeah, they just don't necessarily have the same experience, training, professionalism.
Mhm.
um but I think fundamentally, though, police officers care, right? They want to help, they want to do the right thing, they want to make sure there's order, they want to, make sure people, that the laws are enforced. And um, yeah, I just found it interesting, though. Like, I found some countries sent women that weren't prepared
Mm.
to the mission just to kind of fill a quota. And that really, to me, that's not right. Like, women for UN missions should be, have the same level of training and equipment, and like they need to be prepared the same as men do. Um and yeah, I think that's something, and I know Canada actually as a country is helping to work on that. There's an initiative called the ELSI program, where it's focusing on preparing women for UN missions. And I really think it's important that, countries where the problems are have people there that know those problems and that are trained and ready to deal with them, rather than people from other countries with another perspective. I
Mhm.
think that certainly helps. But I think, it's hard not to walk into a situation with a Canadian. Like, I know my life in Canada. I know policing in Canada. I know my experiences in Canada, but doesn't mean that those are the way that things work in other countries.
Mhm, mhm,
Mhm.
and I think it's that awareness
Yes.
that's key. It's like, yes, I come in with
Mhm.
my own context kinda thing,
Exactly.
right? And just to, be very aware of it and know how important it is to have, those people on the ground who understand the local context.
Mhm.
So critical. Um, do you have, do you have any favorite experiences that you can share, or where you, like, really learned something, or just something that you loved, just overall, either from your RCMP experiences or from the UN?
Yeah, actually, I'll share about one call that I went on that I was happy with the way that I dealt with it.
Yeah.
And it was a crappy call. It was like, I think it was a Wednesday morning at about, I don't know, maybe quarter to 8 in the morning. And there was a report of like an overdose at a house, and they called 911. They wanted the police. Well, obviously the police were going, overdose, but also the paramedics were on their way too. And I was the first one to arrive, and there was this boy. He was probably about 9 years old, and he was just playing his gaming system, kind of sitting on the floor. And he's in there. And I was just like, that's kind of strange that
Mhm.
he's not more engaged. But anyway, walk in, and there's a man laying on the floor. The paramedics arrive kind of at that same time. They give a shot of Narcan. And of course, the next thing I know, this individual is now standing up and kind of swearing at us, saying, like, where are my cigarettes and why are you here, type thing.
Mhm.
And um the boy's mother was distraught. Obviously she was upset what was happening. Believe it was her boyfriend at the time. And her son was, just kind of sitting there, and he was just disengaged. And so I went over to him, and I noticed he had a garbage bag beside him. And I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Yeah, I think it was not a regular occurrence, but obviously bad things have happened before around drugs." And I said, "Are you going to head to school?" And he said, "Well, I missed the bus." And I said, "Oh." I said, where do you pick up the bus?" He goes, "Well, I don't normally take the bus." He goes, "But it was a school trip today." And he said we were going over to Vancouver to, I forget what museum, but they were going to sleep with the mummies.
Mhm.
And that's why he had the garbage bag. He had all those things in there, a sleeping bag and stuff. And so I just kind of looked at him. I said, are they taking the ferry from like Swartz Bay? And he's like, I think it's yeah, Swartz Bay was on the Victoria side. And he said, yeah. And I said, would it embarrass you if you showed up in a police car to catch the bus? And he said, no. He said, jump in. So I drove him all the way out to Sydney. So he caught the bus. So he was able to go on
Aw.
his school event. I know that's just little,
No, but
but I think,
it's those little things, like, you'll
yeah,
probably always remember that.
yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
that's really nice.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about, you know, what you would recommend or what you've based on, you know, you've had so many opportunities and
Mm.
you've, you know, but because you're awesome, clearly. And you've seen, you know, so many things. And one of the things we like to look at, you know, on Wired for Change is just, you know, where do you see opportunities, you know, for change or improvement or just to help, you know, amplify kind of the support that policing can provide. You mentioned already, you know, supporting women who are there to ensure that they have like the needed training at the UN, for example.
Mhm.
Do you have any other observations you can share, just from a systems perspective, on where there are some opportunities that you know we can lean into or support?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, and again, so I retired from the RCMP after 27 years, and then I went and I worked for a large global company, Accenture, in their public safety space, and I worked for Accenture for 3 years. So that was an amazing experience as well, just to see more the business side of public safety, but also how industry can help policing and other groups within the public safety ecosystem, like corrections, borders, courts and justice, and the paramedics groups. But what I would say is, I think with policing, I mean, we could have a whole podcast talking about like mental health and PTSD and resilience, about like overcoming those things that you say, like, you know, we see a lot, we are exposed to a lot of situations that obviously do have an impact, right?
Yeah.
Especially year after year. But what I'd like to focus on just with your question is, so I feel like there's kind of two types of changes that should happen, and they are happening, but this one's slow, right? The cultural kind of organizational change on how policing delivers policing and how they hire and how they retain and they how people can kind of maneuver through policing into different like careers within a career, whether it's forensics or if you want to get into undercover work or you want to get into, I don't know, like the SWAT team stuff or public order, like all these different career paths within. I think there's a lot of work that could be done there to really professionalize like those areas and have people like kind of grow and learn and build through those areas to
Mhm.
be way more effective. And whether that's men, women,
Mhm.
people of diversity, you need it all, right? But then there's also like the whole tech side. When I think about like the work, I think it's really important for large organizations or police organizations to partner with industry and try to solve all their problems internally, because industry does get it. They get what police need to do their job. I, I'm not saying just hand it over and let them do it for you, but I'm saying partner with these people who can help like around data and analytics to be more like to have, you know, your systems integrated so that you can pull information out and you can tell your story. You know the impact you're having because the data shows it, right? It's the evidence you need. It's how you can show the impact you're having in communities, when you know, try new things, do things differently. Um, I think that leaning in more, on really trusting data and analytics to help you make better decisions for the community and make things safer. Whether that's how you deploy your resources, where they're deployed, when, or if it's where are the true like most violent crimes happening and how can we set up, or what works, what has the biggest impact to stop those things or prevent those things. I just think there's a really neat opportunity around tech and around data and analytics that could really that police, you know, can really help police. And I feel like there's this leadership thing happening too, where often people rise to the top because they're good police officers. They're good. They understand, the communities, which is what you want. But sometimes they're not as techie as should be, or they don't bring along the techie people to grow up into that leadership role as well.
Mhm.
So I think there's a good combination that could happen there that could really that I think it must happen. And, something that I got involved with at near the end of my career, which was financial crime, I wish I would have got involved sooner because it's fascinating. Because when you think about it, people commit crimes often, if it's not a crime of passion or a crime maybe ideological, but even ideological, they often need money to fund it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's about greed, it's about power, it's about money. Like, follow the money. It's
absolutely.
fascinating, and
Yeah,
whether it's fraud or money laundering or cryptocurrency, like, it's all so fascinating, and it's part of every crime.
absolutely. It really is. It takes money.
Yeah,
Whether good or bad, it takes money,
yeah,
right? A
and
lot
I
of
know
time.
I'm kinda jumping all over the
That's
place, but
okay.
that's where that leadership and the tech can really help. Like, you can't just have a good investigator sift through. I mean, when you think about money laundering, if you think about all the webs worldwide and how it touches on different countries and different, just like the FinTrack, the banking industry, the like all of it, like there's so much work to be done in terms of partnering and relationships and where you can legally and within legislation, right? Share information. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's hard to keep up
fascinating.
with that potential of, for things to happen,
Hmm.
in the digital world.
Hmm.
I think we're probably still catching up
Hmm.
with that, certainly from a cyber perspective,
Yeah,
but in other areas, as well. How did you end up in, like, financial and cybercrime?
it's a really good question. I think
I mean, it's not a shocking thing. You seem to be able to go everywhere and do anything, but it's just different from some of the other work that you've done.
yeah, I think it's because having been at when I went to tech ops, here when I came to Ottawa and I mean, I'm just used to being uncomfortable or learning, kind of it I was never comfortable in a role, and I think that's a good thing, right? Because once you're comfortable, I think I would become lazy.
Yeah, that's
But
right. We know that now about you.
But, just the tech world is so interesting. It's ever changing. There's lots of gray areas on what we can do, what we should do, what we might not want to do,
Mhm.
from a privacy perspective or disclosure or, just intrusive, if it's too intrusive, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of decisions to be made there. And I think I I wasn't scared of the techie world. I didn't fully understand it, but I was often that voice between the investigators who wanted the world and the techie folks that wanted to solve every problem. And I was kind of going, okay, wait a minute here. What are we trying to do? What's realistic? What ought we do? What ought we not do? But like kind of being that voice of reason and understanding their world and understanding two worlds.
Mhm.
And I think that's what happened when I went, into the financial crime and cybercrime world. I wasn't scared of the techie parts of it, and I was certainly willing to trust the people that were there in terms of the experts, but ask the questions that needed to be asked and represent them. Within financial crime and cybercrime, in Canada, it's quite a group, right, that you deal with. It's sure there's the policing side, but there's also like new legislation work that you work on with other government departments. There's the whole money laundering regime in Canada that, takes a lot of different groups within Canada to get to work towards making things better. And so, you know, learning those learning those two kind of, I guess, like the cybercrime and financial crime at a level where I could represent the RCMP in those conversations and really understand. So I had to rely on the experts
Mhm.
and be briefed and ask the right questions and be able to, try to advance things
Hmm.
at that level.
Really interesting
Yeah.
because you've had so much experience in kind of the physical world, like the very physical
Hmm.
world,
Hmm.
and then also in the digital world. And you mentioned, I mean, one of the things that it sounds to me like carries over is that whole idea of being able to ask good questions.
Hmm.
Is there anything else that just kind of, strikes you as being, it just carries over between both of those worlds?
Um, I mean, I think for me though, when you talk about financial crime and cybercrime, for example, there's just like they're both really big things. Like if
Yeah.
we just look at cyber, and I think you had one of my former colleagues on the podcast,
Yes,
Nina
that's
or
right.
Lena, sorry, Lena
Yeah.
Dabbit. Um, cyber from a cybercrime point of view, there's so much we could talk about. But then from a cybersecurity point of view, like if you think about what the national, so the what is it, the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity,
Mhm.
and then within the RCMP and for Canadian law enforcement, we have the NC3, which is, this helps all law enforcement with anything that deals with cybercrime. Um, but like, there's so much to cybercrime. Like, there's the whole, attacks from foreign states. There
Mhm.
could be criminals. There's cyber enabled crime, which is maybe fraud. Like
Mhm.
there's just so many. There's the business email compromises. There's so much to it, and there's so many different facets, and it's kind of who's on first, who's on second, who's on third, like what is your mandate, what's our mandate,
Yes.
and trying to stay in your lane and be effective and understand it from different people's perspective to be stronger as a Canadian team, right?
Mhm.
And even like supply chain, when you think about
Yeah.
within Canada, different groups involved in things are, it only takes one missing link to kind of ruin the security, right, along
Mhm.
the way. And that's more of a Canadian government concern, but like everybody has to be aware of that.
Mhm.
And then when I think about, when I started digging into financial crime, like there's just so many aspects to it there too, because there's the fraud that's happening, which is just astronomical. And some of it's happening here in Canada by Canadians. Some of it's real estate, some of it's, there's romance scams. There's like any scam you
Mhm.
can think of, right?
Mhm.
There's elderly scams, newcomer scams, like everything. And then there's, things happening internationally against like attacking Canadians in terms of fraud. And then, the links between fraud and money laundering, because you always need like there's just so many linkages there. And then money laundering, people living in Canada, people abroad. Um, like there's just so much to it. And the just how the money laundering is able to happen, how as a Canadian regime, where the kind of the weak links are, how we can build, a more resilient, I guess, or better, have better Canadian policies so we don't have as much money laundering happening here. I mean, it's fascinating. And it's like you could spend a whole career just, in one facet of that.
And it's evolving
It
rapidly.
is. Yeah.
Right, right.
Like in the cryptocurrency, that's fascinating as well.
Mhm.
And yeah, and people often think, yeah, cryptocurrency isn't only used by criminals, right? It's legal. I mean, people can use cryptocurrencies, but to see how criminals are using it to their advantage and the different mixers that they're using and the different coins and it's the trends there is quite fascinating.
Seeing everything that you've seen, I wonder, do you have any, advice or recommendations for, the general public? So if, say you're sitting with a friend having coffee who is not part of this world, do you have anything that you would just kind of tell them in terms of staying aware, for example, or just be careful?
Yeah, I think fraud.
Yeah.
I think fraud is touched. I don't think there's anyone that I've ever talked to that hasn't had somebody in their family or a friend or somebody or themselves scammed, right? And often people don't like to talk about it because I think they feel embarrassed when they're scammed.
Yes.
But I would just say, like, you know, if something doesn't like you get that, trust your gut feeling. I trusted my gut feeling in policing a lot. Like,
Mhm.
they talk about the sixth sense where
Yes.
the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. I've had those situations. I believe in them.
Yes.
But I do think that when you have an email or a text message there's an urgency to it, there's some type of they're kind of trying to play on your emotions, that's when you need to kind of just step back, take a minute and think about it before you click or before you respond, right? Because I think that's what they're trying to do is create those social things that will make you react, right?
I love that point. It's something I talked a little bit, with Lena about as well, that idea of instinct and trusting your gut.
Mm,
Do you feel like that's something that, can be improved over time? Or that idea of even just listening to your gut, like having the
yeah.
confidence to know, like, no, I got to listen to my gut as opposed to listening to the noise, for example.
Yeah, I don't wanna get like, it sounds kinda weird, but I think everyone's a little different. Like,
Yeah.
I really believe that you get out, you get back what you put out into the world. So I really believe that there's energy, right? And there is energy between people. But I think different maybe at different times, or maybe some people never tap into it, but I believe in that energy, and I believe in trusting kind of my gut feeling and being more grounded and kind of in tune with that.
Mhm.
But not everybody's there, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think it's different levels of self-awareness or self-actualization, or, like I took a yoga instructor's course,
Oh,
like
yeah?
200 hours,
Nice.
just because I wanted to be after I retired from the RCMP. I'm like, I just wanna, like, be grounded, and I wanna understand ego, and I wanna kinda just, just release things and just be grounded and be in tune with myself.
Did that help?
It totally helped. I
Nice.
loved it. I
Nice.
just wish I had more time for yoga.
You seem to fill up all your time quite
Yeah.
a lot. That's amazing. So do you still practice yoga now?
I do, but not as much as I want to, but that is my retirement plan.
Right, until the next thing.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
I want to come back to the point that you were making around seeing women at different levels.
Mhm.
Why is that important? Like, where does that come from?
Yeah. So I was mentioning I have a couple of pins on today. So I
Mhm.
have a Women in Defense and Security pin, and I have an RCMP pin, and I wore red because for my love for the RCMP.
Mhm.
So Women in Defense and Security, I'm a VP of Industry Relations on the executive with WIDS, and I love that group. It's been so amazing. I'm so glad that I got involved and that I've held that position now for about 2.5, 3 years. Um, because WIDS really taught me, like, when I was in the RCMP, I don't know that I made a purpose of focusing on women, or, obviously I worked with women, supported women, and that sort of thing. But I think what WIDS has taught me is just like having that community for women that doesn't necessarily happen as naturally as it does for men in male organized dominated organizations.
Mhm.
I think that's what I love about WIDS is that we come together, we have coffee connections, we do mentoring, formal and informal. We have different, events, speaker series, that sort of thing. All sorts of different things throughout the year that we do together. And we meet women from all over, like the public safety, security, and defense sectors, people in industry, people in uniform. And there's men there too that are our sponsors and the supporters. But it's just really about supporting women and creating that network to just uplift women. For example, we have an annual breakfast coming up next week or
Yeah.
this week.
This
Geez, it's
week. It's
Thursday.
this week, just a few days
Yeah.
away.
Yeah. And where we give out scholarships for women who are studying in the defense and public safety sectors. Um, and we recognize leaders within different organizations and mentors, and it's just a really positive group. And I think it's so important that women have that as well, because like I said, I think, if when I think back to the RCMP when I was really busy and I was raising kids, like it was work and kids, and I didn't really have time to have those kind of social interactions where you talk about work and decisions get made. Maybe it's at the bar, maybe it's at the golf course, maybe it's wherever. Like, I just didn't have that, uh, like a lot of men do. And so, yeah, that's what I really value about WIDS, and why I think it's important that women support other women, and women see. I think it's important that women, and I talk a lot about women, but it's also people from different cultural backgrounds and you know, traditionally that haven't been maybe in policing, to see themselves at all levels and able to do anything, right? Like, I
Mhm.
think you have to see it, or it helps to see it at least,
Right.
and to know that it's attainable
Mhm.
and that you belong and that the sky's the limit. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
shouldn't matter.
And so for women who might be considering careers that are similar to yours, who want to be kind of like you, do you have any advice, that you would give them?
Yeah, I think it's really, yeah, be your authentic self.
Mm.
Be you. Show up and be proud. Um, be willing to be uncomfortable in terms of like learning new things and not necessarily getting what you want right away. right? Working for it. Be hungry, curious.
Mhm.
Speak up for yourself. Self-advocate, right? I think that's really important. I wish I would have done more of that. I think women, we get better at it as we get older,
Yes.
right? And more experience. Like I think of my 22-year-old self compared to, I won't say my age now, but me now. It's I think I'm a lot more outspoken and
Yeah.
confident now. Um, but yeah, like I women around the table, I mean, it's so important in terms of, and it's not to take away from the men because their input's super important too. But it's like having that diversity of different experiences, different understanding of the work, understanding victims differently, perhaps, or victimization, right? Or and women are more than 50% of the population. The police needs to represent and reflect the population they police. And again, I don't only want to focus on women. I think it's super important that other cultures and races are like that everybody is covered there.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely.
Mm.
Um, there's so many things that I wanted to pick up on as you were talking. The idea of being outspoken as well. Sometimes I think to myself, it's like I can't wait to be an older lady who's just saying whatever she wants to say all the
Mhm.
time. Because sometimes you filter yourself,
Yeah.
especially in situations where you might be uncomfortable or when when it feels like maybe no one will support you or
Mhm.
what you're saying as well. It just feels like you can, as you get older or more experienced, you can let your guard down more
Yeah.
and more and things like that.
Like I also think the older I get, I just don't want drama in my life. And I just let's cut to the chase. Like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
don't have time for it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'd rather tackle something head on now, like um, rather than have it fester or, like just let it drag on and then it becomes a big, blows up and becomes a big deal. Like I like to tackle things head on and I think for me, I just love change. A lot of people don't like change because it can be uncomfortable. I love change because if we're not changing or evolving, we're going to get left behind and we're going to become irrelevant in today's world, right? So that's why, but it's hard for big organizations like the RCMP, like who feel like they're constantly changing. It's like, oh my gosh, can we just take a breath, right? But like, no, like keep changing
Mhm.
because if you don't, you're going to become irrelevant.
Have you ever, received any like mentorship kind of advice along the way of your career that, you still think about or that had an impact on you?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely people along the way that have had an impact on me, both negative and positive. Had some good ones, had some not so good ones. But um, yeah, like I wouldn't say that one mentor for me stands out more than others, but something I will say that I think is important, or something maybe like I try not to live with regrets, but
Mhm.
I wish I had a really strong female role model in my life. Like throughout my career, there was women in the RCMP that I met that I was like, okay, I like the way she works. I like the way she is, or,
Mhm.
that sort of thing. But they were like not as many, like, because I joined in the or mid 90s. So
Mhm.
women were just kind of, yeah, getting into the out of the constable ranks really.
Mhm.
Um, but I wish I would have had like find a strong female mentor, a woman that you respect, that that you can connect with. I
Mhm.
think that's really important. And maybe for some women it's a strong man too. Like men can mentor women, obviously,
Yeah.
for sure. But I just think for me that's the one thing I feel was missing. I wish I would have had a really strong female mentor that I could, like
Mhm.
I think I needed that. I think I would have had more confidence to maybe excel sooner.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
One last question, I think, although I'd love to sit here and listen to your stories all day because I really learn a lot from them. And I think other people will get a lot from this as well, Kelly. What's something that, makes you optimistic, I guess, about the future? We talked a lot. When you talked about cybercrime and financial, and you've
Mhm.
talked about a lot of other things, I mean, there's a lot to it. There's a lot happening. There's, probably never enough people
Mhm.
to look at it all or to
Mhm.
handle it all. But what's something that makes you optimistic about the future?
Yeah, I mean, the future is scary, right? When you think about it with what's going on in the
Yeah.
world these days. You think about AI,
Mhm.
you think about, I don't know, quantum. computing, all these things that are like just around the corner or happening to us right now. Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns out there, but I really believe in like, I mean, it's about people. Organizations are about people, and when people come together with a common goal and ideas,
Mhm.
great things happen. And that, it brings me back to resilience too, right? People need to be resilient and they need to be willing to change with the times and innovate and adapt. I think there's going to be a lot of that happening. I also have a strong sense of um, like I love our country. Like I'm really like I'm wearing a little maple leaf here that
Mhm.
and this was I bought it online from a company that was it's made by women for women. It's out of Saskatchewan and I just yeah, I'm really patriotic. Like I love our country and I feel like we're kind of under the microscope a bit right now with like some of the comments that have been made out of the United States and yeah, I really believe in Canada, and I think we have the right prime minister right now at the right time.
Mhm.
I don't want to get into politics, but um, yeah, I'm excited for how we're going to adapt and overcome.
Terrific.
Hmm.
Well, excited to know you
Oh,
and to be able to follow your work and your next adventures, where those go. Thank you so much, Kelly, for sharing your energy, with us on the podcast today and your reflections and your experiences, which are, so unique and so interesting and so much that we can learn from, I think. And, your very healthy attitude towards change as well, and how we can help others, meet
mhm.
that change and the changes ahead of us. So thank you. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with us today?
No, I'm just really like again flattered, and I'm very grateful that to be on this podcast. I think it's awesome that you're giving people the voice, and you have a following that wants to listen and learn. So thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah.
Well, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to Wired for Change and continue to follow the conversations that we have and continue to share. Especially, we can get folks with amazing operational experience to share as well, so that we can all learn and elevate our awareness and ability to meet the future. Thanks again for joining us for another episode of Wired for Change.